And now Syrian Foreign Minister Walid al-Muallem says the deadly terror attacks on Syrian civilians are supported by Turkey and its allies Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Muallem has sent 2 letters to the UN Secretary General and the Security Council to complain about the continued terror attacks on Syrian civilians. On Saturday, a twin bomb blast rocked the Syrian capital Damascus, claiming the lives of at least 20 people. Bombs went off at the entrance of the holy shrine of Sayyidah Zaynab. Daesh terrorist group has claimed responsibility for the attacks. Sayyidah Zaynab area has been targeted by Daesh several times this year. And now we're joined out of Madison by Mr. Kevin Barrett, author and a Middle East expert. Now, Mr. Barrett, this accusation that Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar support terrorists in Syria has been echoed time and again. Your thoughts?
It's absolutely tragic the way the governments of these countries have been lured into this divide and conquer strategy, this 4th generation warfare strategy to break up the Islamic world in order to allow the Zionists and imperialists to continue to loot the resources and dominate the people of this region and keep them from realizing their true potential as a civilization and as a religious and spiritual group. This is clearly that Daesh is an instrument of the West and the Zionists, and its purpose is to create this kind of sectarian strife through these very kinds of bombings. You know, when the Americans invaded Iraq, the first thing they did was turn the Israelis loose to murder as many of the top Iraqi scientists as possible, and then they sent in special forces people to blow up mosques and blame the Sunnis for the Shia mosque bombings and vice versa. And we're seeing the results now. But why would the leadership of these Muslim countries go along with it, especially Turkey? I mean, you know, Qatar is Saudi Arabia. These countries are essentially, you know, gas stations for the West. They're not real countries. But Turkey is a very real Muslim country, and it has pretensions for leading the Islamic world. And it's absolutely tragic and beyond stupid for the Turkish government to have been lured into this trap in Syria and be supporting these horrific terror attacks that are simply stirring up sectarian strife and creating a situation that will continue to reverberate with bloodshed down through the years. It's time to stop it, and the Turkish government really needs to look in the mirror and ask itself why it's doing this. And
when you said that the West, that they're a product of Western backing or whatnot, these terrorist groups, I mean, these groups, what possible place do they have in a civilized country's future landscape, Dr. Barrett?
Well, obviously they have no future at all. But, you know, unfortunately, the way imperial powers have often operated is in a sort of Machiavellian fashion. And they find whatever tendencies towards independence are stirring in the lands that they try to dominate. And then they move in and they take over these groups, they steer them, they create fake terror groups, they take tendencies that already exist and then turn them in a self-destructive direction. And that's what the West has done with the Islamic awakening. It has created these Tekfiri groups, which are utterly destructive, which are purely serving Western geostrategic interests. And it's using them in the same way it uses gangs of mercenaries and fascists in places like Ukraine. All over the world, the United States government has been overthrowing the governments of foreign countries. Any government that asserts independence, the U.S. uses gangsters and thugs to destabilize and overthrow that government. And that's precisely what they're doing here. But it's very sad that they've taken on this kind of Muslim coloration. That is, they're claiming that these Daesh-type groups are somehow radical Islamic groups, when they're not. They're actually groups of thugs and mercenaries who are being deployed to actually try to destroy Islam and to stop the Islamic awakening in its tracks.
Thank you, Dr. Kevin Barrett, for joining us here on Press TV, author and Middle East expert, joining us out of Madison.